Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my permaculture project to reduce food waste in my household. I've used the Drawdown project to inform a number of my permaculture projects. And for this project, I'm trying to address the number 3 and number 4 proposed ways of reducing climate change gases. So the number 3 is to reduce food waste. 8% of emissions worldwide are linked to wasted food. And number 4 is to switch to a plant-rich diet with 20% of emissions worldwide relating to meat production. There are permaculture ethics reasons for undertaking such a project. In terms of earth care, we can see habitat loss, animal treatment, and pollution as all being linked to producing food, and it's particularly bad to see that these things come from food that then doesn't even get eaten. In terms of people care, up to half of the global population are malnourished in some way, either by not having enough nutrients or having too much of the wrong kinds of nutrients. So that is a people care thing that can be addressed through reducing food waste. Also, there's a waste of human effort in producing food that then doesn't get consumed. In terms of fair share, industrial agriculture is not particularly fair, with people being removed from their subsistence livelihoods from the land. And in terms of future care, the soil loss from industrial agriculture is pretty damaging for the future. I used the GOBRADIME design framework in undertaking this project, which stands for goals, observations, boundaries, resources, analysis, design, implementation, management, and evaluate and enjoy. So I'm going to go through each of those steps in what remains of this presentation. Starting with goals. My goals were primarily around reducing waste. If we look at food waste in the UK, we can see that 46% of food is wasted in the household, making it an excellent level for trying to tackle this issue. 26% is then wasted in manufacture, 1% in retail wholesale, 6% in hospitality, restaurants, takeaways, 1% litter, 20% farming. And I want to add to this the idea of food that's wasted to the human body because it's not the right kinds of food or the right nutrients. And also thinking about how food nutrients can actually be enhanced after they've been brought into the household. My second goal here was to move towards a plant-rich diet. And my third was to reduce household spending on food. Observations is the next step in this process. And one of the key things I observed was a behavior pattern whereby if I arrived home tired and hungry, this would lead to eating out, to eating processed foods, or to eating takeaways, which all had packaging waste as well as food waste. And this would lead to the garden not getting harvested, and groceries not getting used. We'd have increased costs and spoilage. Boundaries of this project. I just looked at food that was shared by the household or eaten by myself. So that was all of the evening meals. That was lunches and breakfasts on weekends, and then it was my own lunches and breakfasts on the weekdays. And my observations were recorded by month. Also in terms of boundaries, I looked at patterns of movement within the household. So how things interconnected so that we could efficiently get food and efficiently reduce waste. So looking at patterns of movement between home, work, and shopping. We don't have a car, so all food had to be either on site or available through delivery, public transit, or walking. Time was also, of course, an important boundary. So I've already alluded to that idea of the behavior patterns. Resources is the next step. I already had a number of cookbooks that some were good for looking at improving nutritional value of food, others were more about switching to a plant-based diet. I trialed some meal planning documents, meal planning plans. I found them all wanting. Eat Your Books was a useful resource that I came across. It's a website that is crowdsourced, and it indexes cookbooks, online cooking sources, magazines, things like that, so you can search by multiple ingredients, by type of dish, etc. So that became a useful resource. And I already had a lot of jars, but I invested about £25 in some new jars. Resources in terms of where I could get food. These are some of the things I had access to: a local health food store that was accessible by public transit, 2 farmers markets within walking distance, a local veg box that delivered, the forest garden out back, online bulk seller who happened to be local, and a grocery store. Tried to minimize that last one, use of the last one. Analysis. So here's a picture of my mind map analysis. I won't go through it in detail, but doing this process led me to understand that what I was undertaking was a weekly simple design process. And once I realized that, I moved on to design my weekly process. So each week I needed to design a meal plan. My brief was as simple as who was going to be home what days, do we have any guests, anything happening I need to know about. And my survey was looking in 3 areas: at what we already had access to in the garden, the pantry and fridge and the veg box. And then the design would be my list of meals and how I was going to cook them. And then to buy was additional resources that were needed. And in this way, I designed from the plan to the details. And each week I undertook some observation about what we had access to, so observe and interact. And I had tried to obtain a harvest, not just from the garden, but I mean that also from the food that we already had in the house. And I used that Eat Your Books to look for the margins, the edges, where different foods, different ingredients met up, so that I could integrate them all into the recipes for the week and make effective use of all the resources I already had access to. Implementing this design, here's a picture of me hard at work with a weekly design, using a list of recipes on the left side, as well as also the online source I talked about. And here's how I redesigned the pantry to have primary ingredients that are plant-based, buying in bulk, but making sure to store in airtight reusable containers so none of the food lost nutritional value. Glass was useful because I could quickly see what I had and in what quantities. And I piloted this first with tea, moving from bag tea to loose tea, and that worked so well that I moved ahead and did it with the rest of my ingredients. In terms of zones within the house, I would put this plan on the refrigerator, which I would pass by multiple times a day, and so I could quickly see what I planned to cook. And I could also, possibly more importantly, see what needed to be soaked ahead of time, so that everything was smooth for cooking the next day and everything was as nutritionally available as possible. And in this way, I integrated management. So, it takes about 10 minutes to plan a meal. When you do it all at once, it can be up to an hour and a half, which sometimes felt like a lot of time to invest, but it always paid off. Management was all about balancing, so balancing the need to plan ahead with the need to have time to do other things, and balancing buying in bulk with not wanting to waste any food, etc. And in order to meet the best nutritional needs I could, I chose to make a fresh meal each time rather than relying on leftovers. And in order to continue to do this, I had to exert self-discipline as well as accept feedback and apply my learning the next week. So this brings me to evaluate and enjoy the last step. I did not manage to stop arriving home tired and hungry some days, but when I had a plan, I had all the ingredients present and all the prep work done, it wasn't that difficult to produce a home-cooked meal, and probably less time than it would have taken to get takeaway. I observed that although takeaway and pre-prepared meals had been going down for a while to 2016, I did manage to make quite a big difference through doing this planning process. And we moved from eating meat 5 times a week to eating chicken once every 2 weeks, which had a massive 83% reduction in our main meals carbon footprint. In terms of costs, there was a 28% change in how much we were spending on meals out, takeaways, and junk food between 2018 and 2019. That slight spike in 2018 was a change I made in the way I recorded what was takeaways, junk food, meals out. So this is while these meals, the prices for these meals was going up. And looking at average monthly grocery costs, that also went down by 21% since 2016. Part of that was through things like using dried beans instead of tinned beans that cut some costs, as did moving away from meat. And these are some of my resources. So thank you for listening.